Hey guys and gals, and welcome back to another episode of 4th&Baron, where we talk about all the hottest stories in sports and esports. I'm Blake.
And I'm Connor.
And Connor, the Bears just parted ways finally with Matt Forte, and I bet he would look great in a Patriots uniform. What do you think?
You're gonna open with that?
That's gonna set the tone for this entire show.
I just took an arrow to the heart right there.
I mean, Patriots, need a running game, need something. They have a habit of taking some veteran players and putting them in the system. I think it'd be a good fit. What say you?
I think he'd be a good fit anywhere. Honestly, he elevates any team to the next level, and I think if he was in the Patriots, I'd probably have to start crying.
Well, we'll see how that happens. I mean, he had
maybe live on this show.
Years in Chicago, so
yeah.
Well, in today's show, points are scored, more points are scored, and even more points are scored in the NBA All-Star Game. But we're going to start today's show with unquestionably the most pressing story from this weekend. So far on 4th&Baron, we've tried to stick kind of inside the lines to the nuts and bolts of the in-game action, but we're going to step outside the lines for a very serious topic here. Connor, a new federal lawsuit has been filed against the University of Tennessee by 5 anonymous women, claiming that the university has not acted in good faith nor up to the legal standard with regards to cases of sexual harassment and sexual assault. To this point, the suit mentions a 1996 incident of a sexual assault involving the NFL's legendary quarterback Peyton Manning. The incident, painted as either sexual assault or locker room horseplay gone wrong, depending on which party you ask, was settled by 2 defamation lawsuits. The specifics of which have been reported through an article in the New York Daily News. Now, to be clear, Peyton Manning is not a defendant in this lawsuit. In fact, the lawsuit doesn't name any defendants. But Connor, I have to ask, does Peyton Manning have something to be worried about with regards to his public reputation or his legacy in general?
Yeah, Blake, I'm really happy we get to, well, maybe not happy. I'm eager, I guess, to talk about this topic because as like a longtime Peyton Manning fan, this is something that has been weighing on my mind for a long time now. And so what kind of spurred it for me was, a conversation that happened with some coworkers of mine talking about Peyton Manning's kind of alleged sexual assaults, one sexual assault in particular that had occurred while he was at the University of Tennessee, and then an article that was written recently kind of brought it all back up. That article was written by
Sean
King. That's it. I knew it was something King. Yeah, Sean King. Thanks, Blake. So Sean King, who has had some kind of controversial editorial writing in the past, he comes out with this piece really analyzing these court documents, this facts of the case, 74-page documents that were printed by the lawyers of the woman in question who was kind of brought up in this sexual assault. She was a member of the staff of the University of Tennessee athletic program, what appeared to be a very renowned member of the staff who worked there for a long period of time, and whose career, the article suggests, was very much ruined by the actions of Peyton Manning's family as over the course of the lawsuit. She eventually had to leave the University of Tennessee not long after the incident took place, and then she got a new job down in Florida. But then when the Manning family published a memoir, like an autobiography book called The Mannings, which is a very widely sold book currently still, there were stories written in that book that were, I guess, the equivalent of essentially libel against her that seem to have been proven widely false by court documents, and so these stories, though, however, also forced her out of her job in Florida and seemingly ruined her career in men's athletics, which she was trying to be a pioneer as a woman in that industry. So those are the facts of the case, and honestly,
Well, facts of the case, more specifically from the plaintiff's side of
For the
the
plaintiff's
lawsuit.
side, yes. Sorry, you're right. Those are kind of what we understand based on this article and some other stories that have come out. What I'm kind of want to talk about here today, though, is that the facts aren't quite as important as how people are going to react to this. Obviously, they're important for the people involved, but what is essentially happening now is Peyton is this white knight, this paragon of football, right? And his name is kind of being called into question here because of this incident, because what seems to be his lack of apology for this incident. And whether or not it occurred or not, I think that there's a broader conversation that should be brought up here about how we understand really athletes and stars for that matter, and how we treat kind of their transgressions. There have been incidents in the past where things have been brought up. For example, with Ray Lewis and the murder that occurred years ago while he was at a party, and if I recall correctly, he was wearing a white suit that was destroyed soon after that day. Allegations of rape committed by many players. Everything with Adrian Peterson last year, which seemed like every new week a new story was coming out about how he had engaged in child abuse with his children, how he had spent charity money on a rather lewd party with involving his brother, and all of that stuff just kind of fell away. I mean, nobody talked about that with Adrian Peterson this year, right? I mean, the story was just how well the Vikings were doing, top of the NFC North. Teddy Bridgewater was doing well. AP
won another running title.
Yeah, and people forget. I mean, if it's something I probably wouldn't have thought of if not this Peyton Manning thing kind of bringing it all up. And Peyton Manning's going to be kind of the ultimate example of this, right? He did this thing in University of Tennessee, or may not have. I guess it's not totally clear, but let's say he did do it. Everyone has kind of already people have been moving on, and there was a tweet recently from an employee of ESPN who was told that people at the network were not allowed to bring it up to discuss on news programs. And so there's kind of like this self-fulfilling or propagating idea that we should just kind of leave the personal issues of these players kind of behind and see them differently. And so, Blake, I want to know what you think about this in terms of if someone like Peyton Manning, if this incident turns out to be all totally true, all the facts here brought up by Sean King are on the money, is this going to harm his legacy? Like, do you think it should harm this legacy, and do you think it will? I guess I kind of want to turn the question back on you as well.
Yeah, I think absolutely it will have an impact on his public perception, his public relations, soiling that squeaky clean image that he has that has been presented to the public. He's kind of seen as the golly gee kind of guy, kind of face of a lot of multinational or multi-billion-dollar companies as well as the NFL.
Kissing Papa John after the Super Bowl.
So there are a lot of pundits out there that consider the Mannings, Archie Manning, Eli Manning, Peyton Manning, to be football royalty, and that's not just because of their play, but it's also because of the way that they've comported themselves on and off the field, supposedly, to the best of our knowledge.
Yeah.
Those things are very much in jeopardy. He'll always be a great quarterback. That's not in question here. But the legacy is very much in danger, and that's because this incident, even though it happened close to 20 years ago, we're not in the stage where we can say, he was 19, he was in college, immature. Not that that's ever an excuse for any kind of sexual harassment or sexual assault. He didn't. He apologized and he served some punishment and made amends that way. We're far enough behind it now that the scariest thing about this whole incident, the thing that was most pressing to me as I read some of the article that you mentioned that Sean King wrote, is the fact that there seems to have been an attempt at a cover up, and by the Manning family, by the university, by the football program, to keep that image that squeaky clean image of Peyton Manning spotless and feckless. The fact that he testified in court that, instead of the sexual assault, he was actually trying to moon another player in the locker room, and that player that he said he was trying to moon came out and said, no, it's absolutely false. It's not what happened. And that guy, by the way, lost his scholarship.
Right.
In the subsequent years. The fact that he signed to settle this suit, the initial suit with this trainer, she agreed to leave the University of Tennessee, and they both signed a confidentiality agreement about the whole incident. And Peyton Manning broke that confidentiality agreement to write about the incident in his book, seemingly from a PR standpoint to get out in front of it and put his own spin on things before it would ever come back to haunt him. And in the process, bringing on the second defamation suit, where she obviously believed he did not tell the full story of events. So these things point to a more calculated, more ruthless side to the Mannings. And I say the Mannings because Archie Manning is involved in this in many aspects as well. So that is the most troubling thing. When not only do you learn that, it's not only learning that your hero has faults, right? That your hero has made mistakes, because everyone makes mistakes. And there are plenty of football players in the NFL who deserve to be respected as good football players who have made very terrible mistakes off the field. And we all accept this. But it's one thing to know that your hero is a machinated concoction, right? That's utterly a lie. That might be a little bit extreme, extrapolating from this case, but there's an element of the fabrication of Peyton Manning, right? That seems to be at stake here. It's not just learning that he committed this transgression, if indeed it turns out to be true. It's learning that there is a lot of work put into towards keeping that image, a carefully maintained image, clean and clear. And so I want to be very careful about what I say next, Connor, because we have a platform here, and it may not be a huge platform, but
platform nonetheless.
It is a responsibility, and you as a good friend, I want to discuss this honestly with you and get your thoughts on this. I am very reserved about the veracity of this case. And I am willing at this point to give Peyton Manning, in spite of very serious accusations, the benefit of the doubt for the moment. And that's with the reservation that, since this is such a serious allegation, right, sexual harassment, sexual assault, that we understand the responsibility that's on us now as members of the public, as fans of his, to dig deeper, to get to the bottom of this, to find this, to seek the truth of this matter, to take everything very, very seriously, his side and the trainer's side as well. But we are not witch hunters, right? We are not witch hunting. We are not out to burn Peyton Manning at the stake because of an accusation. Because my standpoint here is that you don't live a lifetime, seemingly, of good behavior in the NFL. Because, by the way, since Peyton Manning has been in the NFL, social media has come into play, 24-hour news cycle has come into its own. The camera is always on Peyton Manning, right?
Right.
Don't tell me, and even more so because of that squeaky clean image, that makes these these news networks that could get any dirt on Peyton Manning makes it even more attractive, right? Being able to soil that image. You don't tell me that TMZ gets any kind of dirt on Peyton Manning, and they don't come forward with it immediately, right? So that counts for something, right?
Yeah.
To me, in my mind, that really, really counts for something. And so, at this point, I read Mr. King's article. I think it was at this point I'm going to say competently written, not well written. I need to read it a few more times. I think it was competently reported. Again, like we mentioned, the facts of the case via the plaintiff, so via the trainer and her side of events. At this point, understanding the burden and the responsibility of a very serious investigation that needs to take place, I'm still willing to hold out that Peyton Manning that this is not as bad as it appears. And I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Like, I think that the your final point was really that's kind of the point I want to hold on to here for now, because saying that this is not a witch hunt, I think, is incredibly important, because it so easily could be one big inflammatory article, and then you're banging on doors and you're saying this image Peyton Manning has had for us is a lie, right? Mm-hmm. And that seems to be going a little far right off the bat. And what I think is most interesting as well is that some ESPN articles have been written about this. This case has been filed and everything. Like you said, this incident happened 20 years ago, and just now that Peyton Manning has won his Super Bowl and is going on his kind of like riding off into the sunset ending.
This should be his victory lap. Which
should be his victory lap, but it's the timing is something that should be noted as well. That now that he is in the spotlight more than I think probably he ever was or ever could be, now the incident is being brought up, and it leads you to ask like one of two questions. Either is it because he's in the spotlight now that the people who were involved thought the case would have the most impact and thus finally be able to find justice when they might not have before? Like what I was saying with Adrian Peterson, all that stuff was brought out, and then he plays another season and everybody forgets about it. They just talk about how well he's doing that season. If Peyton Manning doesn't have another season, maybe he doesn't have all that to cover it up, right? The other side of that, though, is that maybe they're just blowing steam for the sake of it, right? I think of cases, there are always cases kind of for and against, but there are cases that I think of, like the Duke lacrosse case in 2006, when the members of the team were accused of rape falsely, but everybody was ready to kind of go against them. To remember that this is kind of that we're supposed to live in a society where you are innocent until proven guilty, right? That we would rather let a guilty man go free than convict someone who's innocent. That's kind of supposedly the logic in which we build our foundation here, and something we should be remembering. However, what seems to be clear from this case is that, yeah, Peyton and this woman who was working at the University of Tennessee did not get along, and some kind of incident took place to cause all of this to happen.
Right.
An incident that it seems that the Manning family has at the very least been trying to avoid for good reason, honestly. Like, I could very much understand why they would want to paint this in a way that makes them look positive. They're such a spotlight family. But what I almost wonder, though, is that, like what I was saying with Adrian Peterson, is are people going to, like, next year, even if it was found out that they were covering, kind of keeping this all under the rug, is anyone going to care about this? Because we have such short attention spans with the media and everything. And on top of that, say Peyton Manning is inducted into the Hall of Fame, which I don't think is really much of a question at this point. Mm. Is this something that should be harming how we think of him as a football player? Because obviously, like, him committing this sexual assault didn't affect his stats. It didn't affect his wins, his Super Bowl victories. It's not like this. It's not like he was using. It's not like this assault case is going to harm his player legacy, right? It's going to harm kind of the image that we have of him as the White Knight, and so that's kind of the. I think the question that that also should be worth noting is that, like, he's kind of this hero built up, this role model that's kind of how we see professional athletes, right, as role models, especially for a younger generation. Do you think it should affect his accolades, I guess, that he has this now? Because people will be looking to him years from now as this great, amazing player. And if it is true that he's been covering up for this incident in which he's being accused of essentially ruining somebody's life, that should that be something that's taken into account?
Well, I don't think it will, and that's because we have some precedent to draw on here, and just because of the human nature, the fact that humans judge what's within their scope to remember, which is a pretty short time frame, right?
Right.
So that's why we had the NBA All-Star game this weekend, right? And it was Kobe's send-off All-Star game. But no one on the broadcast team really mentioned any of the various assault lawsuits that have been brought up against Kobe in the past, right?
Yeah.
Towards the beginning and middle of his career, those were real things, right? Those were actual allegations brought forth towards him. No one was mentioning that last night. Every time we see Ben Roethlisberger play, every Sunday we don't bring up the sexual assault cases, allegations brought against him. There's very much I think that there's some darker willful ignorance by the part of the fan and the media with that regard. So I think that there's a little bit of out of sight, out of mind kind of tendency to that. By the way, to that point, this wasn't an unreported story. I think it's really interesting that was mentioned in King's article. This USA Today, when this happened, ran 2 separate articles on this, and it just never caught on.
Yeah.
It just never seemed to gain any traction with the media. This was before Facebook and Twitter and stories would go viral and things like that. And it was also before Peyton Manning was a large public figure. So, well, that's not true. He was always a large figure, the son of Archie Manning. He was a great quarterback in college and things like that. But anyway, let me tell you why it can affect his player legacy, and why I think people will be talking about this a year from now. It's because this isn't the first legacy tarnishing allegation brought against Peyton Manning within the last 2 months. He also had the Al Jazeera HGH accusation that he was knowingly or unknowingly using human growth hormone, which is now an illegal substance, particularly to recover from some of the surgeries he had, I think it was about 4 years ago.
Yeah.
And so he came out and vehemently denied this, right? And I believed him. I thought he sounded very believable. But again, how many athletes have come out and just
they're not going to
vehemently
say
denied?
yes.
Right. But I mean, you can think about A-Rod, Ryan Braun, Lance Armstrong, all of them.
Probably the
very
biggest
believable
example.
denials.
Yeah.
Lance Armstrong, absolutely. So now I think there's going to be a public reaction of, if this turns out to be true, and there turns out to be a calculated cover-up, which I think is the most damaging aspect of this, are people going to look at Peyton Manning and say, if you're capable of this, could you be capable of an HGH cover-up? And personally, let me be clear. Personally, even if he used HGH, I don't care. He had 4 neck surgeries. All right,
I think that's kind of the general consensus around his HGH use. Yeah,
it wasn't by Peyton Manning fans, but I'm telling you right now, as a Tom Brady fan, there are people out there that want to get Peyton Manning, just if for no other reason, just because he beats their brains out every Sunday, right?
Yeah,
he beats their particular team. There are people that would love to crush Peyton Manning underfoot. It gives, and there are also a lot of people that are on the fence about this that don't really know one way or another, and if that would and are willing to be tipped one way or the other. So I think there's a danger of a domino effect here, right? Where if you're capable of this sexual assault incident, right, and the subsequent cover up, is this HGH thing also has some veracity to it, and that being a banned substance, that could definitely impact his player reputation, at least for the last few years when he set several records. And it can go, I think, again, domino effect even more into tarnishing his reputation, into next year. That's kind of what gets put on his Wikipedia page, and that's how he ends his career. He doesn't have a lot of chances, if any chance, to rewrite this on the field. We talk about Adrian Peterson. Turned around, had a great season, and no one talking about his off-the-field troubles last season. Peyton Manning might not get that chance.
I definitely agree with that. That he actually, and because he hasn't announced his retirement officially yet, I saw recently that Brock Osweiler and the Broncos actually have suspended talks until Peyton Manning officially comes up with a decision in terms of contract updates. And that's really interesting because, say Peyton decides, because I think one story that could trump all of this and make us all forget about this is Peyton Manning comes back and he's not done yet, right? He doesn't take the storybook ending and decides to go for one more year. And I think especially if he is terrible this year, that in and of itself, like playing, all he has to do is play to the quality he did this past year, and the Broncos defense could still probably carry him into the playoffs, but
Probably.
the fact that he's sticking around, that he's not playing well, that he's kind of like a hobbled old man out there, right, 40-year-old guy in the NFL, that could potentially make all of us forget about this. So,
to that end, I mean, you and I have both said that we don't think he has anything left to play for, right? What does he have left to prove?
Well, that's the thing, is that if he joins again, maybe
right.
like you could make the argument that is a calculated move in regards to this whole kind of charade that he's putting on. And again, it's a rather big accusation to say somebody's public persona is totally fabricated. Well,
I agree. And you're right.
And so that is something, again, that we need to kind of closely consider. But I think that this retirement decision is going to be kind of a big moment. And Peyton Manning himself has not really come out to address a lot of the stuff that is coming out. And so seeing kind of how he reacts as well, definitely I think a lot of fans, this is something that I would like to hear from him about. For me personally, this has all been kind of hard to swallow, kind of taking in all this information, because it is kind of, to a degree, like the image, for me at least, my image of him is forever changed, right? That I think that it's even kind of come up that there's a possibility that this could have happened. I think it is terrible. And
to your point, I really need to hear from Peyton Manning, because Connor, we knew where to find him when the HGH allegations came out, right? Mm-hmm. He was not hard to find. He came out and vehemently denied that. Where is he now? That's a really worrying sign for me.
It is worrying, although I would love to see him come out, and if this is all true,
I think he will.
If this is all true, if he came out with an apology, that would definitely kind of shake things up, and I think do a lot to restore his character. I think that's the problem here, is that so many people go in and thinking, oh, we got to cover this up. We can't. Like, nobody wants to take responsibility for their actions, and
right.
That's
allegedly he didn't in 1996. So why do you? I mean, there's a question of, if he didn't then, why would he now? And would it even be sincere if he would now?
Yeah, I mean, at the very least, it's a. Even if it wasn't sincere, or if it didn't appear to sincere, at the very least, I think the gesture would be better than continuing to lie about whatever might have happened.
It would. You're right.
I think this discussion will hopefully continue later in blog format once we get that up. I think this is something that is going to be interesting as a story that will be evolving over the course of the next few weeks, because it is something that is enormous in terms of one of the NFL's kind of keystone figures, his name really being called into question. In the meantime, Blake, I want to bring up once more a sports esports crossover topic. Let's kind of let's lighten the mood a little bit. We come back. We were really down right now. I felt like I'm not feeling too happy having to talk about Peyton like that. But
this is what we do, though. Sports and esports.
Yeah, sports and esports, lifting it up. So right now, Blake, I want to talk about momentum in sports and esports, right? So there's kind of this feeling in various leagues that, if you start to win, you feel better about yourself. That creates kind of a self-reinforcing emotion in which, when you feel better, you're going to play better, and it creates this snowball effect, right? And that's kind of what the momentum is that if you're winning, you're going to keep winning, right? And so that's been coming into play a lot in a variety of these sports and esports we cover. Blake, I think you had something you wanted to say, though, in terms of how this relates to League of Legends specifically versus traditional sports.
Yeah, absolutely. I see a lot of really interesting dynamics as far as momentum is concerned throughout a lot of different sports and a lot of different esports. And I think just looking at the way that the play format is set up in a particular competitive environment has a lot to do, and the mechanics of that sport or esport have a lot to do with whether momentum can carry through in a season or in a series of things like that. They always say in baseball that momentum in a series isn't a thing at all, right? Because since you're the most important player on your team, the pitcher, is different. Your starting pitcher is different every day.
Right.
They say momentum is only good as the next next game's pitcher. So they tend to think that momentum doesn't really have any significant impact on baseball because of the way baseball is designed and structured. But things like basketball or hockey, where you're playing a game every other night or every night for a 3-game stretch, right? And it's your same guys out there. You're just kind of rapid firing these games. You can really feel that guys just get on a roll. They get energized. They're meshing well. They're clicking well. The plays are working. They seem to have more energy. Like you said, they have more confidence, and momentum seems to really take effect in those sports. Then the comparisons I want to draw, which I think are super interesting, is between football and the League of Legends, most particularly the current split formats for the North American, European LCS, where each team plays twice a week on either Thursday, Friday, or Saturday, Sunday for North America. So they play 2 games a week. So in the NFL, they play once every week, once every Sunday, or on a Monday or Thursday. So this means that they're not playing every day. So you would think that there's not a whole lot of momentum being able to be involved in favor of they have a week to rather prepare for an opponent as they do in football. And I would say in football, momentum is something that comes much more in terms of coaching, right? Because that's why they say, we take this 1 week at a time. We're on to whoever next week, because you have so much time off. You got to prepare for a whole different. You're preparing specifically a new game plan, right, for a new opponent. That you feel like you lose some of that head of steam you build up. But in League of Legends, you have these things where you can go into a week and have it and win both your games that week, and have a rival in the standings lose both their games that week. And all of a sudden, it's still a 10-week regular season. Your standings drastically change, and you can just feel some of these teams get like a huge bolster of confidence. And so I think it's a really interesting dynamic, and I want to get what your perspective is here in terms of, is there a momentum that you can feel is tangible between in League of Legends or in other esports, and how do you think that compares to some other sports that are out there?
I'm glad you broke down the different sports too, because, and especially with, like you mentioned, football, momentum week to week can depend on the coaching. With football, I see momentum coming more into place in half to half in a game rather than week to week. I think there's enough time in between football games that, kind of like with baseball, that a pitcher is not going to play every single game. The time in between when the key people are involved is great enough that you can forget what happened in a bad week last week, right? Even if it's a short week, like you go from Sunday to Thursday or something like that, you can still kind of put whatever happened last week behind you and play a new game. Maybe some players are coming off of injury. Maybe you have like a new offensive scheme or something you want to try out. But half to half is where you really see the momentum. And that like for example, closing out a half with a score, even if your team is behind 2 to 3 possessions.
It's huge.
Yeah,
you
getting
feel
points
the game
on the board.
Shift.
Yeah, as you go into halftime, you feel like, hey, I've got a chance. We made something work. Let's keep making it work, right? And then, yeah, you can feel the game shift as it moves into the second half. You go into the locker room, you regroup, you get out. League of Legends, you're right. It's pretty different, and it's interesting what you bring up about the standings too, because, for example, like this past weekend, there was a huge tie for second place now. And now the standings are a lot more kind of segmented out. TSM stands alone at second place. There's a 2-way tie for third place. And then the rest kind of filter out as it goes along. But a team that is getting, for example, like Echo Fox, who we're going to talk about in a little bit, that gets some of their key players back, has a good 2-0 week, versus another team maybe going 1-1 who's above them in the standings. That big shift, especially because you're playing 2 games a week in just 9 weeks, creates a lot. And with league teams in particular, players have come out time and time again and talked about the difference between winning and losing, and how that affects their attitude and how that affects the kind of their gameplay going in. And that when a team loses, it's like a real test of their mettle, right? That general atmosphere is down. Teams are prone to fighting. A lot of these teams out here are not just groups of friends that wanted to play a video game together, right?
They're also very young. They're also very young players.
Young players, yeah, teenagers, early 20-year-olds, if that, who are kind of being put together with people that might not even be from the same country as them and forced to play together. And so some people aren't playing up to the standards of others on their team. There can be frustration, and losses can create enormous rifts, whereas getting new players, or victories rather, creates kind of a honeymoon period where as you win, team attitude is high, morale is good, and going into the next game is just going to feel better, right? Because you feel better about yourself. And so I think that momentum is almost more important in the LCS in particular than in any other sport, really, because attitude is such a big part and can swing so wildly because these are such kind of young kids who really are in a world that doesn't have nearly as much infrastructure or support staff. I mean, there's so much support staff in professional athletics, right? You've got you have several coaches, individual positions have their own coaches, whereas some teams might be struggling to have even one coach. Or in an organization, and only like the top few would have like anything similar to like a lifestyle coach or someone who can kind of help them with their day-to-day problems as they really move out for the first time and are living with kind of a group of people their same age in just a gaming house playing League of Legends. It's such a weird mental situation for that team that feeling good and winning is just going to breed more winning. And that's why you see so many streaks in the LCS. You talk about Cloud9 in 2013. You talk about Immortals right now. You talk about Fnatic last season. And Fnatic the season before that, too, I think one of the best examples is Fnatic. Not only did they have their 18-0 season, but a couple splits before that, they went straight up and down 8-0 and then 0-8 in terms of their winning and losing.
Right.
Yeah, the winning fed off of each other, and when it lost, nothing seemed to work, and then they just kept losing, right? So
right.
I see momentum as most important in the LCS.
It feels like to me as well, in the LCS and the format that there is now, it hits the perfect sweet spot, right? Because momentum is something that you want to build up over a significant period of time, but you also want it to last, right? Yeah. That's the problem with basketball or hockey is you can win 2 games in a row and then the very next night lose a game, right? Momentum's gone. The thing is here, if you come into a weekend in the LCS and go 2-0, you get to carry that feeling for the rest of the week, right? And use that, like you said, that makes practice so much better. It's so much more productive in the team atmosphere environment.
Good, yeah.
Oh yeah, and you get to carry all that positive morale into preparation for your next 2 teams, right? So there's like this sweet spot of you get to keep that momentum that you earned going while having time to put in that preparation, because basketball teams, especially when they're on like a 6 or 7 game road trip, they don't get to prepare for individual opponents. They're going out and playing 7 games in 9 nights. And you don't get to prepare. You barely get to make it to each city, make it to each stadium to play that game. So momentum is often just physical at that point. But in League of Legends, there's some kind of intellectual cooperation momentum. There's some strategy momentum, right, where you're just crushing these folks with this killer strategy that you get to prepare every week. And again, I want to go back to the NFL comparison, because at times it seems like the NFL is like sort of plodding, right? And teams are just like slogging through one win after another. And if only they could play 5 games in a row, then they might like look great. But as much as we were saying Carolina's on fire this season, they had to cool off. That part of what made their streak remarkable is they had to cool off essentially through every week, and go through a bunch of more practice, go through a bunch of more walkthroughs without pads, and meetings and study film, and just for one game. But when you can win 2, as it is right now in the LCS, I think it's a fantastic example of how of interesting momentum dynamics. And I also want to get your thoughts on this, because unfortunately, I think this is a pretty good format, but the format is shifting into the summer split for the North American and European LCS, where we're going to move into a best of 3. A best of series where each team will only be playing one other team in a given week, just in a best of 3 in A or a best of 2 in EU. and how that might affect the momentum dynamics there.
Yeah, I see that. I think I think you're right on with the two game thing. That it's kind of, the best of both worlds comes from. It's kind of like the NFL system where they have all this time off, but winning two games I think just feels so much better than winning one game, right?
But in the standings where you only play so many, that's so impactful, right?
Yeah, two wins really
they're
puts
not
you up
playing
too.
50 games. They're not playing 50 games in a split, right? They're only getting to
Yeah, they get 18 games.
Yeah.
Which is very similar to how much you would play in an NFL season in 17 weeks. And you're getting two wins right off the bat is just going to, yeah, you're right. It's going to send you straight through the standings. And you're going to feel really good. I actually, for that same reason, don't think that the best of format is really going to change much. And it's because we see that a lot in Korea right now. I'm not going to bring up China because I don't think China is a good example for how anything works in terms of esports being set up.
They also play a ton of games.
China plays a ton of games. You just watch the LPL sometime. It's just absurdly ridiculous. But in any case, in Korea, they play a best of three set every week. And sometimes teams play, sometimes teams don't play. But Korea can be very streaky as well. I mean, the the GE/Coup/Rocks Tigers are because they go through so many sponsorships are a good example of this the past couple of splits. They've been really rock solid, just plowing through games, looking really, like Korea can get really streaky too. Like top teams will just kind of emerge and just stomp on people. And that is in part due to the talent of the teams just kind of rising above and being like, the teams that streak tend to have the teams that are the players that are best in the world. So there might be some exceptions there. But I think that we're still going to see the best people in the region who can mesh well as a team, like Immortal style, like I've been talking about, are still going to kind of feel the momentum. Because winning a best of three, you're still winning two games, right?
That's true.
And a best of three kind of, I feel like it feels better against the team because, in a league game, one thing can go wrong. You make a bad Baron call, you get aced, and it can swing so easily, especially now. And
it also means. Oh, go ahead, sorry.
I was going to say with death timers, like the time you spend dead after you're killed in a League of Legends game, being so long, so much earlier, making mistakes earlier on in the game can be devastating. And in a best of three, you kind of have room to kind of regain yourself and collect. And if you can win a best of three, like especially if you're down a game, that's a big momentum thing too. And momentum is going to add further onto this. Momentum is going to take a lot of, because you're not playing best of five, so it's not as relevant. But in a series, momentum is going to be especially important too. That if you go 0-1 in a series and then steal back the next two games where your opponent was feeling pretty good about themselves for winning the first game, like that's got to feel pretty good too, right? And you're going to carry that feeling into the next week and into practice and all that.
Yeah, I think there's also something to be said for winning a best of three, like you mentioned, in that it's extraordinarily hard to cheese your way into a best of three win, right? If you win a best of three series, you earned it, by play, by solid strategy, not by surprising the enemy team. I will say this though, I've always thought through watching a lot of best of five series that momentum inside a best of five series doesn't exist for me. And this is also some of the interesting dynamics I wanted to bring up to you. You mentioned that you think momentum in football can often be half to half. I've honestly, because I think momentum needs an incubation period, right? It needs some time to take hold. And since games in League of Legends are so iterative, so if you could have 5 games that are just half an hour long each, right? And those would all be very standard games. It just doesn't feel like you can really have a ton of momentum except in one scenario, and that's if a team goes up 2-0 and the other team fights back to 2-2. If you have that 2-0 swing, right, and going into that 5th game, I think there is momentum in play. But if it's just a one-game swing either way, I don't think I've never gotten a sense of real this series just is in their hands now, or they totally are just gonna roll through this. Never really gotten that sense from in a best of 5.
Interesting, because I think of some best of 3s that kind of turned out to be 3-0s, specifically the CLG TSM final, that just felt really, really. And I love that series. I've watched it several times. That series
it feels like TSM just didn't come to play though. You
they
know what I'm
did,
saying?
but it feels like CLG just kind of got on a roll, right? Like they going into game 3, like they were feeling so good. They're up 2-0. They could just kind of do whatever. Like, let's play Ash and throw arrows out and see if we can catch out Wild Turtle, right?
Okay, yeah. No, you're right. So let me modify that to saying one game swings, right? In these best of 3s or best of 5s, I don't think carry any really significant momentum.
Well, that's
unless
fair.
Even when the game is crazy, I don't think it carries significant momentum. 2 game swings though, going up 2-0 or coming back from 0-2, more significantly coming back from 0-2.
Yes.
I think that's where the momentum kicks in League of Legends. But I think we'll have a lot more exposure when the next splits roll in.
Well, so we're talking about this though, and talking about winning series. I think we're going to see the opposite of this, and I'm going to go back on a statement I said before that the LCS is going to be kind of the same in terms of momentum. Only half of the LCS I think is going to be the same. We have on the other side in EU. It's not a best of 2. They're just going to kind of play 2 games, right? And you can win that series, but you can also tie in that series. And that's how the LPL is as well. And so what we're going to see, I think, in Europe is that if you come out in a week tying, right, you're still winning a game, but you didn't really win, right? It's not going to feel good. It's going to feel very similar to a loss. And maybe we're Americans. We don't know what it's like to tie, or maybe in Europe,
their culture just understands.
They're used to it, so maybe the momentum will keep going through there. But I think it's going to be much easier to kill, I guess, any streaks in Europe with this whole tying thing.
Yeah, I agree. And us being both NFL fans, we can tell you that when 2 teams, very, very rare, but it sometimes happens, when 2 teams tie in the NFL.
You can tie in the NFL, yes.
Both teams are very clear in post-game conferences that we lost. Like, both of us lost.
Yeah.
And it just feels awful to all parties involved, fans, teams, coaches.
Because it might as well be a loss. If you're a half game behind another team, you're a full game behind, right? It doesn't really matter.
Because it happens so rarely. And so, so tying is like the ultimate downer. But yeah, just it's understanding. We'll be watching closely how that evolves. Throughout esports, we really enjoy the league NFL comparison. I think there's some interesting dynamics into how this works. We need to do a full segment in the future, Connor, on how this works in Counter-Strike, because Counter-Strike is highly iterative in that round-based stuff where,
Counter-Strike's a whole different animal.
Yeah, that's you. I think there's a chance. There's real. I mean, I think the whole format, the way you play these matches, is based around the ability to gain momentum on a terrorist or counter-terrorist side and roll that on a particular map.
Momentum doesn't exist at all. I think there's no momentum in Hearthstone.
We need to do a whole future segment on momentum in Counter-Strike and if there's any kind of momentum in Hearthstone. And again, we love launching into these esports comparisons. But for now, we want to highlight actually a team that we just brought up in that last segment, which is Echo Fox. Mm-hmm. So Connor, Echo Fox, this North American LCS team, just got their all-star mid laner Froggen back. After he underwent some visa issues. Then they went on this resurging tear through week 5, beating both Renegades and Energy for a 2-0 break back to 3-7 in the standings. Connor, is this a sign that Echo Fox can turn their season around and maybe even make the playoffs?
Well, Blake, making the playoffs is going to be tough. We've gone through 10 games, so we're more than halfway through the season at this point, right? Only 8 more to go, 4 more weeks. Mm-hmm. Making the playoffs is definitely going to require I'm going to say 90+% win rate.
Wow.
Well, actually, maybe not. The threshold for the playoffs, let's see, it's the top 6 make it, right? Right. Currently, we have hovering around 6th place is Team Liquid, who's 5-5.
Well, let me tell you the teams that they need to beat, and I want to see if I can interest you in whether they can beat these teams. All right,
give it to me.
They got to be Renegades. All right, that seems imminently doable.
I think that's definitely beatable.
They have to be Dignitas, a very hot and cold team at best, and they've looked like at times the worst team in the LCS. They have to beat Impulse, which isn't
also
I admit a better team than I thought, but also quite hot and cold. They've strung together some 1-1 weeks against mediocre teams as well. If they can beat those 3 teams, they're in the 6th spot in the playoffs.
Yeah, I suppose you're right. No. They'd be in the 7th spot, wouldn't they be?
Oh, that's right, because that's how counting
Yeah,
works.
so they wouldn't make the playoffs, but they wouldn't be
But they
in
wouldn't
relegation either.
be.
So
Their season
they
would be
be
saved, in my opinion.
so
They would
the
stay
next
in the
person
LCS.
up beyond them then would be Team Liquid, currently in the standings.
Probably. I have a feeling that Energy is about to go on a little slide, string together another couple 1-1 weeks. I think
Energy's
it's
I think on a
possible.
4-game losing streak, yeah, and
Yeah, I think it's
so
possible that Energy ends up being in that sixth spot. So I guess
but between those
sure.
two teams, Team Liquid and Energy, that's where I don't know if Echo Fox is going to be beating them. It's possible. The thing is, okay, in a match, I don't think Echo Fox necessarily beats those teams. What's going to be interesting to see, though, is if those bottom three teams you mentioned, Tip, Dignitas, Renegades, if they're able to take any kind of games off
Right.
of Energy, off of Liquid, that's going to put Echo Fox
Lower
up. I think Echo Fox is
lower
looking.
that bar.
Yeah. I think Echo Fox is definitely looking a lot better. KFO is coming out as a strong top laner. Again, having Froggen coming back. Keith is obviously looking solid. I think it's a decent team. I don't think this is a bad team at all. But I don't think this is a team that's in control of their own destiny, especially given their current record in terms of making the playoffs. I think this team is definitely going to have a comeback. I think they're probably going to. They're definitely over 500 means they can't lose more than one more game, though. So I don't know about that. But at the very least, they're going to have a positive win rate going into the rest of the season. Playoffs, I think, are too much of a stretch for them at this point. I think that Team Liquid, while not having the best week this week, is still a force to be reckoned with in terms of new talent and as they continue to develop. And Energy, as it continues to try to find out its identity, is also still going to be the former tied for first place team. I think it's going to be tough to knock out at this stage.
Well, I'm going to make a case for them making the playoffs, all right?
Echo Fox? Sorry, give it to me.
Yeah, Echo Fox. I think this like we said, they have some momentum now. They finally, after just struggling with a sub squad, they can say all that is in the past. Those weren't our actual players. That Hard mentioned that we weren't practicing with them. We weren't scrimming with them. We were always with this roster the entire time. This is what we were all in on. And they have Froggen
Probably
back.
should scrim with the subs, though. They might have won maybe one more game.
You'd wonder because they hung in those games and the subs weren't that terrible.
Yeah, it seems kind of a
I think
bad
I think there's a value to that mentality, saying that we stuck to our guns and our practice schedule and it worked.
Yeah,
right.
That's true.
We had this 2-0 week, and admittedly one of the games was against the Relegades. I mean the Renegades, but the other one was against.
You're not fully
Energy.
with that.
Yeah, well, I need to eat some crow because Renegades were my number 3 pick as my pick to be the third best team.
Were they?
In the North American LCS? They were. I probably shouldn't have brought that up.
Did you have Immortals in there? I need to go back and watch that episode.
I didn't have Immortals in there. I had TSM Cloud9 and Renegades.
I remember
as my
TSM
dark horse.
Cloud9.
Whoops. I mean, I don't know. I remember like trying to make that case to myself and like on the show as we're recording being like, wow, I'm making like the anti-case to this because I've never been in that big of a Freeze fan, never been that big of an LHH fan in the last few years. Okay, anyway, Fox is beating them, right? They still have another game against Renegades that they get to actually close out the season with. So that, if they're one win away, they can just count themselves in, right? They got that game. Let me tell you the rest of their schedule right now. I want to see if this seems plausible to you. Next week, Liquid and Impulse. What if they 2-0 that week? All right, that's a 2-0-able week. That's possible.
Maybe.
Week after that, TSM Immortals. All right,
That's an 0-2 week right there.
Very tough week.
Guaranteed 0-2 week.
Week after that, Dignitas CLG. Right, that's a 1-1 or possibly a 2.
I'm gonna go 1-1 in that week. I don't think you're.
I think 1-1 is most likely, and then after that it's Cloud9 Renegades. So looks like we're ending on 2 1-1 weeks. So look at this. They have one game. If they beat TSM in that TSM Immortals week, right, they have a real shot at making the playoffs. Because Team Liquid has been
at 7-11
struggling. They've been struggling with that would be winning 5 of their next 8.
Yeah. No, it would
so
be winning
that would
4
be
of the next 8. 4.
No, because I have them beating
you have them
Liquid,
beating
Impulse,
Liquid. Okay,
TSM, Dignitas, and Renegades. So that would put them at 8 and 11.
You have them beating TSM. Is that what you said just now?
That's what I'm saying. If they can make that game, I
Okay,
think
yeah.
they make it into the playoffs.
If they don't go 0-2 in the TSM Immortals week, then maybe.
That's the crucial game.
Maybe.
Because I think they can, and if it comes down to a tie between them and Team Liquid or them and Energy, I like their chances. Right, Energy seems like it's wobbly right now, and Liquid. I don't know if you listened to Piglet's post game interview in the Liquid win this week. But he said some things that I actually have a big problem with when they asked him about when Riv asked him about his new teammates. He asked him about Lorlo, Dardoch, and Matt, and he basically eviscerated all of those guys on air, on stage, in front of like the nation. I had he's basically saying like, oh yeah, they're like good players, but Matt has some attitude problems and Dardoch has some work ethic problems. He wasn't questioning their mechanical skill; he was questioning them as like teammates. And I was like, I just did not love that. I'm going to predict that Team Liquid is going to be a little bit divided in the coming weeks, especially next week for their game against Fox.
That's an interesting point to bring up. The team dynamic again is coming really big. I think that maybe with Team Liquid, I just see that as being part of Piglet's attitude. He's world champion Korean AD carry Piglet,
Look,
right?
If he was talking about the mechanical skill,
whose summoner name is God Piglet, like he's definitely not going to be. He's going to criticize everyone on his team's work ethic, right? Because none of them are going to be nearly
their
his own
mechanical
level.
skill. I'm all for that.
I think he's streaming right now.
They have
actually,
attitude problems. When he says they have judgment problems. When he says he said Matt. He said Matt's an okay player, but he makes excuses. Right? When he goes into that kind of stuff, that builds resentment among your new teammates. I don't love it. I don't love it.
But you got to consider how the teammates aren't looking at Piglet like any other guy, right? These are probably people who were just guys like us a couple years ago when Piglet won the world championship. If you started playing with Piglet, like you just got good enough to be on his team somehow, like I don't know, I wouldn't mind whatever the heck he wanted to say about me. He's probably right.
Sure. How many times has Piglet been to Worlds since then? I mean, what's he done since then? He hasn't done anything.
No, but that's not the point. The point is that he's already done enough to earn that respect. He won Worlds. He's been there.
Mechanical skill. I'm with you, mechanical skill. But in the time, this is like when Kobe. Do you remember when Kobe would do this in the last few years, where he would call out some of his teammates, not to their face, not in the locker room. He'd call them out publicly to the media, so it would get back to them. And they would then hopefully be embarrassed enough or like called out enough to improve their play.
Yeah, but
you know how much
Kobe
that never worked.
Kobe wasn't as mechanically good then as Piglet still is now, though.
That's probably true, but it's still this leadership tactic. Like Piglet, for all I know, chose not to approach these guys and discuss these problems. Maybe he has. He chose to air that laundry in an interview.
Perhaps it'll be interesting to see how Team Liquid plays, but I still think it's a long shot for Echo Fox, and we're just gonna bring this up real quick because this is really hilarious to me. Just this whole Renegades in your top three. You had the Patriots going to the Super Bowl over the Broncos.
I think that was possible.
Renegades thought the Panthers were going to shut out the Broncos. I'm saying that
just because I made a bad call doesn't mean you get to misconstrue everything.
You made several bad calls, and then we look at my side of the story, and I said that the Panthers was going to be a pretty close game, that the Broncos defense was going to hold in there. I said that the Broncos were going to beat the Patriots, and I said that Immortals were going to be undefeated, and they still are. By the way, they've gone through every.
You just did this, and made some calls, and they happen to have turned out. But we're going to see how the long-term record holds up. We're going to see how that.
When you make multiple calls that are correct in a row, it ceases to be random. It means that I know something.
What do you mean ceases to be random? Three random calls in a row can all orient themselves the same way.
That's true, but these aren't random calls. Is what I'm saying. I'm saying is that this is a pattern that is developing in my call structure. And
we'll let the viewers decide.
In this relatively easy call that Echo Fox is not going to make the playoffs, but we'll see. That's not something for the viewers to decide. That's Echo Fox's journey. In the meantime, Blake, we're going to turn into a different type of competition. And this is different from just about anything we've ever seen.
Yeah.
Recently, Hearthstone, in coordination with Red Bull and Honda Civic, of all things, hosted a tournament called the Red Bull Brawl. Now, this tournament, Red Bull Team Brawl, excuse me. This tournament was held between Team Archon, Liquid, Tempo Storm, and Cloud9 in a kind of round-robin format. It was a sealed tournament, which is different from a lot of Hearthstone tournaments that have happened thus far, which means players don't come in with their own deck. Players were given 240 random cards, or teams rather, were given 240 random cards and allowed to construct 3 decks of 30 cards each that were unchanging throughout the entire group stage, that they would each play in 3v3 games that all occurred simultaneously. So basically, like the players of Team Liquid, who were Savitz, Dog, and Trump, would play against the players of Tempo Storm, who is Eloise, Reynad, and Firebat, each kind of 3 1v1 matches happening all at the same time, and the players on the teams were mic'd up so that they could talk with one another, as well as look over and help with each other's games. So this tournament really created one of the most unique team aspects into Hearthstone that has happened really since the Archon Team League that happened last year. And I think it brought a new element of team play to an otherwise individual game in Hearthstone, and a new, I think, form of competition for the esport in general. Blake, what do you think about this format and how it affects Hearthstone as an esport?
Well, first of all, bravo to Red Bull and Honda Civic for like having the guts to pull out something totally new and inventive and off the wall, and in their featured tournament, choosing not to play it safe, not to do something cookie cutter, but rather to not just this wasn't just a little bit of a mix up, right? This wasn't saying like, oh, we're gonna go back to last hero standing, or conquest format. This is
Right.
This is taking Hearthstone in a completely new direction, and I thought it was deliriously fun to watch. Now, will it remain? Will this be back? Probably. Will this make it a significant mainstream splash? Probably not. And that's because while it was hilariously fun to listen to some of these players talk to each other during games,
See if Reynad could count to 29.
There's still a team aspect. You do team things such as, mulligans, team things such as decide which hunter trap it is, or team things such as team count lethal, and then mess up. But anyway, so like the team aspect I thought was limited, was fun, was interesting. My favorite part of this, though, Connor, was the sealed aspect. I haven't watched personally another sealed Hearthstone tournament. And that's one of my favorite things in competitive card games, is the ability to just have that arena-esque, just throw it out there, give me what you got. But even then, sealed is like a little bit more of a pure version of that, right? Because in arena, you can kind of steer your deck in the way you want because you have choices, and it'll give you, some rarity levels. I don't know. I love this. I love the cooperation aspect. Totally off the wall. Totally new. I'd definitely watch it again.
I think you're kind of underselling the team aspect, though, and it goes into what you're saying about the sealed part of the tournament, right? You're given 240 cards, but you're only using 90 of them, and you cannot repeat cards in the decks, by the way. And so what's interesting about that is that you're not only being kind of pushed to the limits of your deck-making ability, which we both agreed is a key part in your skill as a Hearthstone player, which is why I think Sealed is great in that it tests that. But as a team, you're making these decks, right? You're making these 3 decks as a team, and each of you is going to play these different decks. You're going to keep track of your opponent's decks. There's so much nuance that's going on that isn't so easily going to happen with just you, right? Maybe if you're spectating another team's kind of duel, or if you're looking at your own opponent who you might play again after the group stage is over, and you kind of memorize what types of cards that they bring in. That's not just like that's not just an individual thing, right? That's something you can discuss with your teammates, as well as deciding what cards you're going to bring into the match, how you're going to go about playing this deck, and then if you maybe had a big voice in a couple of the decks, giving advice to your other teammates who are playing those decks, right? And that's kind of my favorite part about it, is that it's taking a unique look at how Hearthstone can be played as a team game. Whereas I've played so many games where we might all be crowded around one computer giving advice, like, oh, maybe you should trade here. I don't know, like having that kind of discussion. That even though the turn only lasts for about a minute and a half, that you can get a lot of thought into how turns could play out because there's so many different ways that you could play certain cards, right? And so having that other voice, because you just alone can easily doubt yourself, you can miscount. Apparently as a team you can also miscount, but you can doubt yourself. But having that other voice there to tell you, and so that's why seating position can be so important too, right? Because then the middle person is going to be helping the people on the sides. Like I think it's
yeah.
I think there's much more to this team aspect than you might initially have been giving it credit for, and I would love to see this employed multiple times because it makes me think of, like, you can root now for Tempo Storm as a team, who won the tournament, by the way, spoiler, sorry, or Team Liquid.
Well, that's what we're the show's literally in the business of spoilers.
Yeah, I guess that's fair. So, or like if you really like Cloud9, like you can vote for them going forward and not just the individual players.
Yeah. No, you're right. I've always loved being able to root for an organization, especially when it comes to Hearthstone, since there are so many individual players out there who all have considerable skill, and who otherwise aren't necessarily easily differentiable from each other.
Right.
But yeah, definitely when it comes to you're absolutely right. Both you and I highly respect the deck building skills as your skill set as a player is what makes you truly a standout good Hearthstone player or not. And so being able to see that from a team perspective was really interesting. They definitely had to make some unique choices. Yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong. I had a lot of fun. I'm definitely gonna go back and watch some of the other matches that I missed. I definitely want to see it again. But will this be a mainstay event? Not sure. Just not totally sold there.
Probably not mainstay, but I think it'll be. Well, I agree with you there. I don't think it will be something that is employed probably outside of a Red Bull sponsored event, but I think it should be. I think it would be. It's definitely something I would love to try if I could get 4 other or 5 other people who want to play Hearthstone with me, which
just buy a bunch of packs
and we'll get a bunch of. Oh yeah, I forgot about that part. Yeah, that would be an expensive little exercise, but yeah,
still
we can use our own decks. Blake, I'm glad we got to discuss that, and now we're going to move on to a brand new segment that is going to be hitting our show, 4th&Baron now. This segment is called Game and a Play. Here, we are going to just take an individual game. It could be a big name game, it could be a small game from any sport, esport, whatever, and we're going to pick one play from that game that describes the game as a whole, right? I think that it's definitely easier said than done, but I think that there exists, and kind of the motivation behind this segment is that there exist kind of archetypal plays that really define how a game goes. So Blake, I want to start with your clip right now.
That's right.
And you have a clip from the NBA All-Star game, if I'm not mistaken.
I did. So this is from the NBA All-Star Game on Sunday of the NBA All-Star Weekend. All-Star Weekend in general, in my opinion, huge success. You got to go check out the three-point contest, lived up to its billing, and people are calling this maybe the best dunk contest of all time. But when I was looking for just one dunk or one three-point lineup to one three-point streak to show you, none of it could totally sum up what those events were. They were both great, so I encourage anybody who is interested, go out and watch them. There were some insane dunks this year. Definitely could be the best one ever. But there was definitely a play that sums up the totality of the NBA All-Star Game. And before I get to the actual play itself, I want to highlight the ending score of the NBA All-Star Game. This is a compilation of the league's best players, certainly best offensive talents, and also, some would say, some of the best defensive talents.
You'd imagine.
Unfortunately, you could. Well, we're only left, with our imaginations to help us because they played not a lick of defense in this game. So much so that the final score was West 196 versus East with 173. So
games struggle to break 100. Like, that's insane.
First off, I want to say to people who hate on the NBA saying that they play no defense, no. This is what happens when they play no defense. All right, this is what actually happens. And in that respect, limiting games by 90 points, or more, is quite impressive when it comes down to it. Defense is played in the NBA, but this clip that I have here, this clip I have here, it sums this up completely. Because we see Steph Curry launch an outrageous three-point shot. By the way, he has the range to do this, but this isn't a shot he takes in a normal game. He made one from half court, by the way, earlier in this game where he just stopped and pulled up and said, "I'm just gonna take this shot." Yeah, I'm just gonna take this shot, and he made it from half court. His teammates were like, "Oh yay, Steph Curry!" Like we didn't have to run all the way down the court that time. Thanks so much. He just jacks one up again from almost half court, misses, and then every single player, 3 players from the East, just stand there, feet planted, rooted, do nothing, and Kawhi Leonard just doesn't even run, just saunters down the lane,
and
grabs the rebound, and just puts it back for a slam dunk.
Yeah,
and it's just like, and then none of the players are really that phased like this. They're like, all right, now it's our turn. The East is saying like, oh, great, that was cool. Now we get to do that. Let's also note the score. It's 86-84 with a minute to go in the first half. In the first half, they have about the same score of what would be a low-scoring NBA game. There was no defense played, and to me, that made it a little unenjoyable.
You don't like just all-out shootouts?
Don't get me wrong. Okay, actually, let me rephrase that. So in every NBA All-Star game, right, it's expected that there is really no defense played, that it's an offensive showcase.
It's like the Pro Bowl, yeah.
But in every NBA All-Star game, in the fourth quarter, with like 5 or 6 minutes left, the losing team, usually like a veteran guy, will come in and say, "All right, boys, we are going to actually play some defense now. We're going to get some stops. We're going to bring this game back." And then for the last 5 or 6 minutes, it actually becomes a game of the league's best talents just going all out on each other for pride and guts and glory. And that just didn't happen this time for whatever reason. People were trying to, give it up to Kobe. They kept passing it to him, so they would hope that he would get MVP. Didn't pan out. But that, just the fact that defensive spark just never ignited, right? Almost out of laziness, that the game kind of suffered a little bit. I think this play is an absolute, demonstration of how that unfolds. Imagine a game of this, right? Of this almost near constantly.
Yeah, I could see that. Yeah, you want to see people try, right? Like when you get the best players on the field, like you don't want to just see them all practice, half court shots, right?
It's one thing to have an exhibition, right? That's fine that this game doesn't count for anything.
Right.
It's another thing to just have, them in a shoot around. This was a shoot around, Connor. This was a practice,
Yeah.
That's not cool.
Well,
so what do you got for me?
So what I've got for you, Blake, is a clip from the most recent Cloud9 versus Immortals game. So this game was game of the week for the LCS this past weekend. Cloud9 trying to come into second place, trying to be that team to dethrone Immortals, right? And so they pick a really interesting team comp here that is going to dictate this game. This game was insane, by the way, if you want to watch it. It is a really high kill count, just a lot of fighting, a lot of interesting mechanical plays. So what we have here is we have Malphite with balls, Rush on Lee Sin, and Jensen on Victor. So this Jensen and Rush pick are really comfort picks for them. Lee Sin should be able to handle Nidalee early game. Malphite synergizes really well with the Victor that Jensen has looked great on. And so they have a good team comp here. Meanwhile, Sneaky is on Jhin, and this is the first...
and Sneaky seems to love him, by the way.
Yeah, this is the first competitive game any pro player has ever brought out Jhin. He's the new champion. So looking to really make his mark on this game and work well with High's Alistar. And so Cloud9 have a good combination of a good team comp that they're comfortable with, and looking like the team that could defeat Immortals. Immortals, however, always seems to make things happen, always seems to come out ahead in a game early, especially, and Cloud9 wanted to counter this, get ahead early, win game strategy. That's what Lemonation, their coach, had come out and saying this week before. So we're going to roll the clip in a second here and explain exactly what happens. So essentially, Cloud9 are looking like they're going to have the advantage because they're getting ahead early. And so High is going to try to make a clever map movement by invading here, but Immortals are ready, and they ambush C9 here, getting the stun off on Sneaky, who's this immobile Jhin player, right? And Wild Turtle gets the execute, and they get first blood, getting an advantage where they really should not have, and being able to snowball the game from there. So that even though their composition might not have looked as good originally, they were able to get off to a good start. And throughout the game, you could see Immortals just barely kind of out-predicting, out-rotating, and coming ahead in team fights by just a little bit. Little tiny wins in team fights that they snowballed into a under 30-minute victory, a really fast victory.
A bloody victory, though.
A bloody victory, tons and tons of kills. Immortals averaging almost a kill every minute in that game. That first blood, I think, it was just kind of an example of how Immortals play and how just kind of an out prediction. And doing what your opponent does, which is High with his shot calling, with his game management, taking that and just doing it better. And that's what Immortals has been doing all split. And that's why that's my game in a play right here.
There you go. Super impressive, like you said. That prediction, that cerebral quality to Immortals that really makes them stand out as just not just a team that's meshing well, but a team that's actually on top of their game. It's impressive to see.
Yeah, it definitely was. And again, my bold prediction from a few weeks back was that Immortals was going to go undefeated on the season. So please be sure to keep watching the LCS and see if that happens. They've already beaten every team once. They just got to do it all one more time.
That's not happening. If that TSM game was TSM threw it hardcore, they're going to bring it back.
TSM did throw that game. That's true.
They're going to bring it back in the second half. You can count on that. But on that note, we're going to move into our last segment of the show, which is our bold predictions, the one we always close out a show with. Connor, give me your bold prediction for this week.
All right. Blake, my bold prediction for this week has to do with League of Legends once again. We have quite a few kind of big games coming up, and I'm going to predict. I'm gonna kind of throw this in your face here. I don't know if this is how bold this is going to be, but I'm going to say a Team Liquid 2-0 this weekend. In spite of recent problems, I think that this team has a lot of talent, is surging together, and I think that this is going to be a 2-0 weekend for Team Liquid.
All right, we'll see it, because that pretty much flies in the face of mine, because I'm going to double down on what I said earlier.
Are you going to call it Echo Fox 2-0?
I have a bold prediction. I'm calling a Echo Fox make the playoffs, and so that for me that entails a 2-0 this weekend. It's possible if they don't 2-0 this weekend, but those two things line up for me, just the way that their schedule pans out. So I think they're going to edge that last spot over ultimately Team Liquid, and Team Liquid's going to be in that 7th spot on the outside looking in.
Interesting prediction. So your bold prediction is that they're going to make it. I look
Fox
forward
just
to
looks like a team reinvented. And if there's anything that we know from, like,
That's
say,
true.
football, in football, you get scared not of the team that was rolling at the beginning of the season. You get scared of the team that gets rolling in November or in December.
You know what? I was just looking at the schedule, and I totally was looking at the wrong week. And I don't. All right, so Liquid is playing Immortals this weekend. No, but I don't want my predictions to counter each other. That doesn't make any sense. I'm saying Immortals 18-0, and I'm saying Liquid 2-0.
Oh man. Random predictions, indeed.
No, I was looking at the wrong week. I was looking at the following week. All right.
Team Liquid. Change it if you want.
I see. Okay, I definitely don't think Team Liquid can beat Immortals. I'm sticking with my Immortals 18-0. That is definitely what I want to see. All right, on the fly. You know who has a tough week is a team. Actually, this is probably a much better prediction. A team that is teetering on the edge of looking not as good as they were originally, and a team who has a tough schedule playing both Dignitas and Cloud9 is Team Energy, and I think they are going to shore things up and have a good showing both against Dig and Cloud9. Come away with a 2-0. So I'm changing it from Liquid to Energy. We're calling an audible.
All right, sounds good. If everything pans out as I see it, they'll also be kind of in contention with Fox for that last playoff spot. So
yeah, so I still get to get you a little bit there. So it all works out.
We'll see. We're gonna for our viewers out there, we have been keeping track of these bold predictions. They're not just disappearing into the ether. We're gonna have a little graphic coming up on your screen at the end of every episode where we keep a running tally of who's been right and who's been so wrong.
Which is Blake at this point. So you'll get to see that.
Which we'll see. The viewers will be able to decide for themselves. We'll have that coming at you guys soon. In the meantime, be sure to leave us any of the feedback that you want, constructive, non-constructive, flame us, whatever. We love to hear back from anyone and everyone who's watching the show. We're always trying to improve and add new cool stuff. And most importantly, hopefully we're back on our regular schedule, Tuesday nights every week. We have a new video out for you guys.
All right, excellent. Yeah, thanks guys for watching, and have a good day.
Take care.